games and gamers together now have the sheer magnitude to be a significant unifying force for the world.
If I'm to choose between a greater and lesser evil, I'd rather not choose at all.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Be better.
Check this out.
Hello humans, what's going on? This is episode 339 of The Hungry Gamers. I'm your host, Jono Peck. Find me everywhere at Jono himself. And joining me all the way from the Flower Kingdom, swinging around New York City, it's Matt Tilby. You can find him everywhere at It's Tilby. How you doing, Matt?
Very, very good, Jono. Yeah, I'm trying to find all those wonder seeds. It's been a bit of a hassle, but it's been a fun week with, of course, some massive games having just been released previously when we did our last podcast. But how are you doing? It's been a busy week.
It's good. It feels good to be able to talk about like some new games, some big new games too. Everyone's eating good this week. It's awesome. Like the hits just keep coming because Alan Wake 2 just dropped like yesterday as of recording this, and haven't had a chance to get into it yet, but it's also sitting around a similar kind of Metacritic, or maybe even higher than Spider-Man 2. I think it was like 91 when you showed me, or 90, was it?
Yeah, I guess the aggregate scores that were sort of floating around X or Twitter yesterday when I showed you were like solid 10s and 9s across the board.
Yeah.
So very, very impressive. And of course, right around the corner from Halloween, so perfect timing for that.
Yeah.
But it's just been, it's so funny because we've had all of these amazing games this year, like Zelda, Starfield, Spider-Man, Mario, and combining that with sort of the uncertainty around employment and sort of studios laying off people and all this sort of issue that's sort of come through. It's such a weird year for gaming in general, because we've had such quality mixed in with such, I don't want to say tragedy because that's not the right word, but just unhappiness
To
really.
some people, it's tragedy to those involved, I'm sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a year of ups and downs, and we've got like everything happening with like the economy and the cost of living, and like things are crappy for a lot of people. But if you've got enough money to play, to buy and play the games that are coming out, probably having a good year, at least in sense of your escapism.
Absolutely.
Options. So there's that, and we all know, we all need that escapism at the moment. But yeah, as you said, even if maybe Alan Wake isn't your favorite game of the year, it's definitely in that conversation just based on the criticism alone being so well received, and enough. I think it's enough to throw this out there as one of the great years in games. Like, there's something for everyone. I may have said this on previous episodes, but Baldur's Gate 3, Diablo 4, they're not my jam, but for some people, it's like they're definitely their favorite game of the year, if not one of their favorite games, like, of all time. So even if you take that away from what I've been playing, there's still been, Dead Space, RE4, and Spider-Man, and Mario, if I ever get around to playing it, and just Tears of the Kingdom, and just like hit after hit. So whether you're a Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, whatever you play, PC, there's something that you will have probably been obsessed with at one stage or another this year.
Yeah, it's been a veritable smorgasbord of games across all genres, really. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, I think, this year, that we've had a couple years where a lot of the games would be sort of centered around that action or adventure, or there'd be something that's horror, or one particular genre would stick out more than most. Like you said, there literally seems to be something for everyone, whether it is a Baldur's Gate, or that RPG style, or it's Zelda, or it's Starfield. Forza Motorsport came out, and there's something for racing fans, and there's something for sports fans. EAFC came out, and that's been somewhat decent. Everyone is getting a little piece of the gaming pie, and I think it really does show that obviously with that sort of turmoil in the gaming studio landscape, despite that, there is some very good work being put out there. And yeah, I mean, I'd probably say it's probably one of the top 5 years in games for at least a very long time, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the only thing missing from that list is like a really good first person shooter, but we also still have like Modern Warfare 3 coming out soon, which I'm not a big Call of Duty guy, so I don't know whether there's hype around it being up there. But certainly, if you've been looking forward to Call of Duty, it's again a very exciting time of the year. And speaking of the time of the year, it is the spooky season. You mentioned the fortunate timing for Alan Wake. We aren't the spooky, ghoulish. When it's not our brand, Tilby, as so
No.
much as it has been in the past for Brendan and Ali. They very much lean into that side of the paranormal and the world at large. So we're not going to try and be something we're not. We're not going to do a whole episode around horror and Halloween and that kind of theme. But we are going to pay respect to the tradition of the Hungry Gamers around this time of year, and that's going to come into effect later in the show. But for now, we are going to talk a little bit about
The week that was.
see what I did there.
Love it. Excellent.
Seamless. We're going to talk about the week that was. The games we've been playing, which we've mentioned already. Let's start with a game we've both been playing, Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac. I think it has pipped Starfield at the post, if that's the right term, to become my game of the year so far.
Ooh.
I platinumed it last night. It's by no means a perfect creation. It's got a lot of technical hiccups and flaws that have been discussed much over the social medias, including simple AI problems, simple audio problems, glitches that pause progress and require restarts at checkpoints, but also the more hilarious
The cube.
white box,
The
white cube
cube.
that's I think been patched out. Insomniac kind of did like a
Yeah, a
tongue in
little
cheek
F
kind of
for like
rest in peace
pay
for it.
respects.
But there's been some there was some funny replies in that thread, kind of saying like, make it a suit in the DLC, like pay respect to the cube. That's that a lot of play, or I guess a lot in the scheme of things, turned into this cube and were swinging around in the cube. I feel like a similar glitch happened in Miles Morales, if I'm not mistaken, where like an object from the world became the main character, whether it was like a garbage bin or something like random.
Yeah, I think it was a
like
garbage
that.
bin, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it may have been a lot more rare than what's happened with the white cube. But, all that stuff aside, what's been your experience with Spider-Man 2? We're not going to go into any spoilers, obviously, but let's give our kind of quick review.
Yeah, like it's more of the same. It's been, really, really good. I don't know how far in I am. Like it's probably been, I'd say 15, 20 hours in so far. And
That's pretty far. It's not
yeah,
a really long game. Yeah.
it's not a hugely long game, but it is like, and I think obviously a lot of the time you'd probably spend with the side missions and clearing out friendly neighborhood reports and things like that. But it's just more Spider-Man goodness. I think we all sort of expected it was going to be pretty good, having played the first one and then Miles Morales. I think swinging is always just going to be like so good, and just sort of the subtle additions and tweaks they put into that with like the web wings, I think are very cool. I think those sorts of little things that really just add on to what was already a really fun experience. I think the only sort of complaint I would probably have is just more about the sort of endless waves of enemies and just throwing as many enemies at you for the sake of doing so. Obviously, you've got certain powers and things that can sort of do a fair bit of crowd control for that, but I feel like they're just like, okay, let's just throw 6 regular people, 1 big dude, and a robotic cat or lion or whatever it is at you, all at the same time. Good luck, and it does get frustrating having to do that maybe 3 or 4 times in every single mission.
It's like you'd beat them all, and then a tank rolls up, and another 10 of them jump
Second
out.
wave,
Okay.
and then a turret, and it's like, come on. Like, I enjoy the moments where there's a little bit something new happening in the game, or you're going through a maze, or you're, you know, all those sort of
The
different.
stealth moments are probably like my favorite in the whole game.
Really,
When you can, it really is like the longer and longer this series is around, the more it evolves to become Arkham Asylum Spider-Man edition.
yeah, a lot of comparisons that I'd seen for like
Yeah.
Spider-Man to the Arkham series, which I think is good.
Yeah.
I think when you said stealth, I was probably more thinking about the Mary Jane.
Oh no, not me. No. No. Let's be very clear. No, not those. Although the Mary Jane sections, which we hoped were long gone, are much better than they were the first time. She has
because
a bit
you
more
have a way of
agency.
defending yourself.
Yes, she has a weapon, and she has like some pretty cool moments, especially later in the game that I won't go into. But like she's much less. I'm going to hide and be this completely different change of pace to. It is still a change of pace, but it's a bit more. It's less of a hard pill to swallow, if that makes sense. And it's, I don't know if those sections are shorter, but they feel much more necessary to the narrative this time around. When I'm talking about stealth, I'm talking about the skulking around from above, setting traps, distractions, using the arsenal of web tools at your disposal to thin out a herd before you sound the alarm and have to fight like waves of enemies, like what you said. And the challenge of like, okay, can I get through every single one of these without being seen, which will reduce my overall body count because they won't call in the reinforcements or whatever. And there's like the hunter areas, like bases, that are probably the most intense version of that because of the way those areas have been designed. So that's something to look forward to for those who haven't got that far. But yeah, I think that if in terms of like what's changed from the first Spider-Man or even from Miles Morales, you've obviously got the two different Spider-Men. It weirds me out that they call each other Spider-Man. Like, I don't know why. I just was like, I guess it's like there being two Matts and you just both calling each other Matt. But I would have hoped that one of them would be like Spidey and then the other one's Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think they're obviously just sort of like trying to ensure that they don't call each other Peter and Miles, so they don't.
Yeah.
So civilians or enemies don't pick up that scent.
It's
But
a quality, yeah.
Yeah, I can understand it.
Spider-Man, yeah. And so you got the two of them, and they are very distinct. They have different abilities, different suits, what you would expect. But they have added a lot more to those combat abilities in this game than what we had from Peter Parker Spider-Man in the first game, and even all the extra cool Venom abilities that were added in Miles Morales. So I've enjoyed that. There's obviously like the symbiote component to it as well that keeps things fresh, and the abilities just continue to evolve as the game goes through, which is tied into the narrative. Like there's actual reasons, not just like a skill tree, although there are skill trees. So I feel like combat has evolved since the previous games. Traversal, which we've talked about being an utter joy, still is even better with the addition of some of that stuff like the wings, but even just like little things like there's a slingshot move and there's a way to whip into like 90-degree angles around corners, and just little tweaks that are factored into the skill tree to make swinging around that city a bit more kinetic and a bit more responsive, and just to make you feel that extra bit more Spider-Man-y, which is awesome. Like there is an easy, like I can't remember the name of it, but an accessibility option that gives you easier swinging. Like I guess that would be handy for people that don't want there to be any thought into it. But I do enjoy like, okay, I'm going to go this way, I'm going to swing between those two buildings, and then I'm going to whip around here, wingsuit for a while, and then I'll do like a line jump, and I'm going to spring off it and dive, and I'm going to I enjoyed that aspect to it, and trying to feel like it's an immersive Spider-Man experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think figuring out whether you're going to sort of do low and sort of get that arc going to sort of pick up speed, or you sort of go high up and get the big jump in the air and the flips and everything. And I I don't want to sort of spoil too much, but there is a suit that you unlock for Peter Parker that sort of references the Spider Verse um, movies, which is very good. And sort of
There's a
if you
few
get,
of those, yeah.
I think I've only just unlocked the Into the Spider Verse suit for Miles Morales, and I feel like I will not be taking it off because like that.
Are you
That's
playing it with the 30 frames or the 20 frames per second version?
they. I think they put it on by default for both
Yeah,
the Miles Morales one and the one that I'm not going to
Spider-Man
really
one.
spoil
Yeah,
for Peter Parker. But yeah, I think you can also add it to
you can
like
turn it off. Yeah,
you can turn it on and off for like other suits as well, which
yeah.
is cool. But just the like, yeah, that sort of customization aspect to the whole
Mm.
game once again, and like the amount of suits that are in this game is like quite a
There's like
lot.
75 or something like that. Yeah, I was playing with my son Micah. He's about to turn 4, and we try to keep him away from violence and stuff. So I haven't been able to play any of the like story parts. But when I'm just swinging around, I give the controller over to him. I've tried to teach him some of the basics of swinging, and some like he figured out the slingshot move on his own. And he's always like, I want to change suits. Like every like 2 minutes, he's like, I want a different suit. I want a blue one. I want a green one. So yeah, there's enough variety to keep a toddler entertained.
It's a perfect game to do that, I guess. Apart from half the game, actually
Yep.
fighting people, so that kind of
Yeah.
ruins it for you there. But I think the one thing that I particularly dislike about the game, and they've somehow made it worse from the original game, was uh, doing like the atom sort of splitting thing, or taking out
Oh,
the
the
sort of like
science stuff,
the
the mini
sciencey
games.
shit. Like it, I just can't
The
deal with
difference
it.
this time is that it's optional, and last time it was part of the main story progression when you went to Peter's lab. This time,
Yes.
apart from one mission when you learn about how to do it, it's all like side content that you don't have to do. And I was surprised that that was in there too, just because I knew people didn't like it the first time around. But it's skippable, and they made it skippable in the even in the original version through the PS5 upgrade as well. So that they heard the criticism.
Thank goodness for that, because
Yeah.
I was struggling. I was like, if you take this out, it's going to get rid of this one. You don't want to do that. I was like, I just want to swing around and fight people. I don't want to be doing
Yeah.
science in my action game.
Yeah, I did get the platinum trophy last night at 1 a.m. And I, so I've done everything, and I can say that the side missions are mostly really enjoyable. There is repetition, obviously, and waves of enemies to deal with, but there's enough variety that you can go, okay, I've done a couple of those bases. I'm going to do something else. Like I'm going to chase one of these drones, or I'm going to take some photos, or whatever it is. So um, I feel like they did a great job of making all those side missions feel like they're tied into the world rather than just tacked on extra. For example, in the first game, there was a collectible that was Peter Parker backpacks, and they all had some kind of collectible inside them that were relevant to his backstory and references to comic books and stuff. Great, except why does he have 60 backpacks that he's stashed all over the city that you have to go and find? Like, it didn't really make sense in the world that this kid could go through this many backpacks. Even if they're the cheapest backpack you can find, it's going to set you back. So my brain goes that direction, and in this game, it all made a lot of sense, and it all felt like a seamless part of bringing New York to life. And this rendition of New York is amazing. Can't say enough about it. The fact that they've added the eastern boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn, it adds enough geography to the world to feel like it's not just Manhattan for the third time, but with the extra, the wingsuits and some of the slipstream wind kind of tunnels that you can get caught into. It doesn't feel like it takes like a million years to get from one end to the other. If it does feel like that for whatever reason, the quick travel in this game is amazing. It's one of the coolest quick travel functions I've seen in any game. I know that's kind of a weird sentence, but you can click on this map, and as soon as you click, you basically are not just in that uh, region, but the exact spot that you've clicked on in that region, it will take you there. So you can, it's not just certain points you can quick travel to. You can quick travel anywhere on the map, which makes it pretty unique as far as those systems go.
Yeah, like I've not had to use it yet. I think it's good that it's
It
there.
unlocks, yeah.
Yeah, it's good that it's there, and obviously you have to do a little bit of work in each sort of borough or sector to unlock that for that section. But I'm one of those people who's like, I could do it, but I'm just having too much fun swinging
Yeah.
around, pulling out the wings, and just sort of
Yeah.
doing it the old fashioned way. Like, I don't know. It's
When you
just
see
that
3,000 meters and you're like, maybe I'll just do a quickie.
no, I'm definitely like get
Get me
the
there.
get me the let's have a bit of fun with
Do
this.
some side missions on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's see
Let the
what's going through there and
let the
knock that down.
ADHD just like take over.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you get the home run achievement? Because that was one of my favorites.
I did. Yeah, I rounded the bases for that one. We could probably talk about Spider-Man all day. There's other stuff to get into, obviously, but the last word, I guess, I might just say about the story. It's having finished it, it's very impactful, much like the games prior. I don't know if it's gonna resonate with me as much as the first game, but both Miles and Peter have their own things that they're dealing with. It's handled really well. The balance between using the two of them is never really disjointed to me. They've done a really great job, and the performances are fantastic. And it's not a perfect story by any means. It's a Marvel superhero story, very much. But if you have enjoyed other Spider-Man or even Batman Arkham games, I would say this is one to jump into. You can go straight to this if you haven't played Spider-Man or Miles Morales. There's a great catch-up option before you begin. It's not recommended because those games are also excellent, but if for whatever reason you find yourself with a chance to play this one straight off the bat, then it's always an option. And can't recommend this game highly enough. I'm sure that if we end up doing any Game of the Year discussions with Hungry Gamers later this year, it'll be definitely coming up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Like 100%. I think it's got its flaws, and it's it'll always be compared to the first couple of games that Insomniac did for it. But I think just the quality of life, things that they've added to it, and just sort of those subtle changes makes it just that slight step ahead. I think it's definitely well worth it. Sort of like what 90, 91 that it's getting on Metacritic, and yeah, it will obviously be in the conversation for Game of the Year, and well worth it for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and I should just throw in there as well, the portrayal of the main villains in this game is also like really cool and something I haven't seen in other portrayals of those villains, which I'm not mentioning them just in case some people want to go in completely blind. Matt Tilby, tell me about Mario Wonder. I haven't got it, but you've been enjoying it.
Mario Wonder is possibly the weirdest Mario game I think I've ever played. Like I'm probably only maybe 4 or 5 hours into it myself, having spent up most of that time playing Spider-Man, I think, or sort of because it's just it's so
Is this weird good or weird bad?
weird good.
Yeah,
It's weird in just the ways that it's changing the expected norms of what a 2D Mario game should be. And I think like that's a testament to Nintendo for breathing new life into an IP that's been hanging around for quite a while. And it's probably, I'd say, the weirdest game since Odyssey, and even then, like, it probably ramps that up quite a bit. But like it just does such a brilliant job of doing new things in a very sort of old format. And I think it's just it's hard to say because like there's so many things that are going into it, trying to find the seeds and sort of getting the elephant power up, which is wild, by the way. But it's just very much a refreshing experience for Mario going forward.
Yeah, that's cool. I've only really seen like I haven't seen much of it at all. So I did go and check out like the IGN review by Ryan McCaffrey, and some of the effects and like unique aspects to each level. I guess it's called like the Wonder Seed that you
Yes.
find. Yeah, the the different variety of gameplay mechanics that each one of those seems to introduce in every level is really far out there, and from everything I've heard, just makes this game quite weird and unforgettable in a good way. There is definitely weird bad as well as weird good, but this seems to be on the good side and doing really well. Both of the games we're talking about have been huge successes. Spider-Man sold more than 2.5 million copies within its first 24 hours, and that is apparently a record for a PlayStation first party game. And then Nintendo said that Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the fastest selling Mario game ever in Europe. So I don't know if that's because Europe got the figures out there sooner than the others, or if it's maybe lagging slightly behind some of the other games. But either way you look at it, it's got to be a pretty good week for PlayStation and Nintendo.
Yeah, it's so weird because like Wonder was only announced maybe like 2 months before it was released, and they had to like get that thing out the door, and you only saw a little bit of marketing for it, and then yeah, you see that it's the fastest selling Super Mario game in Europe, and that's no small feat. So it's very cool to see that people are picking up what Nintendo is putting down for it. But really, I think we all sort of expected especially when we were sort of talking about it last week when we recorded on the day it came out. Like we're obviously expecting it to be Spider-Man #1 and Mario #2, and it pretty much was because there really wasn't too much else coming out on that particular week. But it's fully warranted. Both games are doing such great things for their respective consoles, and yeah, I'm definitely keen to play more Wonder when I get the chance.
Very good. I don't know if I'm gonna. I think I will play it at some stage. I might wait until my kid's old enough for a 2D platformer to really kind of get something out of it. At the moment, like when he broke his leg recently, we started playing Odyssey, and it was very much he very quickly was like, "You do it." Like, couldn't handle the control scheme. Like, learning to run around in a 3D space is a new thing for him. But I think that the 2D will probably be a better introduction.
As I was going to say, is
For
like
Odyssey.
I feel like the very simple like left to right 2D aspect
Yeah.
of Wonder would have been more easier than say like him going through what like 20 minutes, half an hour of Spider-Man every day. So, but
Well,
it's
yeah. In Spider-Man, you can just kind of hold down the swing and not really steer around so
yeah,
much. But
that's
yeah,
a good point.
kids are quick learners, so we'll see what sticks, and we can move on to the news.
News and notes from around the internet, presented by Audio Technica.
So, Mr. Tilby, the first topic this week is titled "What a Thrill." We've got Snake Eater in UE5. Konami has unveiled the first official in-game footage of Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater this week, after revealing the game through a cinematic trailer at a PlayStation showcase in May. Konami has shown off the remake's impressive visuals made possible in Unreal Engine 5. And they did it at an Xbox event, so they're clearly not showing any favoritism. What was your reaction? This is just a kind of a quick little acknowledgement of a game that we're excited about. What did you think of seeing this, slice of gameplay that stands separate from the cinematic footage we'd already known about?
I think the first time I saw it, I was like, "This is something that Jono immediately needs to see," because I knew that you were a big Metal Gear Solid person. But looking at the footage, like it looks beautiful, and I think everyone sort of seeing that it was running in Unreal 5 is a sign that they're not taking any sort of backward steps with this. They want to give it the sort of love and respect that this game deserves. Obviously, one of the best of the Metal Gear Solid series, perhaps one of the best games of the 2000s. You could probably even
Yeah,
argue, but
that's fair.
it looks superb. I think obviously very early days for just the game in general. Like I'm not sure. Did they say when they're going to release this game?
I don't
Like
think so. No, I don't think we got any substantial news out of it.
Yeah, because I would say it'd be a little bit before we get anything from that, but
Yeah.
all signs seem to be pointing to something really good. I'd like to see like actual sort of fully fleshed out trailer sometime soon, but it is a very good sign for those Metal Gear Solid fans looking to rummage around in a cardboard box in the middle of the
Mm.
jungle. So that should be good.
Yeah, I did get Metal Gear Solid 5 vibes from some of the just like the movements of Snake.
Yes.
So I felt like, okay, that they've kept true to the way that that character moves and looks. And yeah, just seeing this game with the realism that you can get through Unreal Engine 5, it's very cool. I was very happy, very impressed with it. I know some people out there in the world, as always, there's people that will complain about anything, and there's some criticism that it's kind of lost the heart of the original game, that the color palette's off, that this and that. But it's a realism, like Unreal Engine does realism amazingly well, and that's what they're going for. If you're going to update a game that's 20 years old, I don't know what else you'd really want, especially something that's as cinematic as Metal Gear. If Kojima could have made it look like this when the game came out, I'm sure it probably would have looked like this because he's kind of obsessed with cinema. So there's that to it. I know that it's, the lack of Kojima is probably still lingering over this regardless, but I think that, we've seen enough that we can be excited that it's not uh, a half-baked measure. They're at least, as you said, going all out with the visuals. It's not just, as we've seen with the HD Metal Gear collection this week, a rusty coat of paint over something that's already quite rusted in the visuals of the old Metal Gear games. That kind of turned me off. I was a little bit excited about like checking out those games, but the reception of HD collection has turned me off doing that until at least some kind of major sale, just so I can kind of play Metal Gear with trophies one day.
Yeah, definitely. I think we sort of referenced the Mario 3D All Stars pack that came out in 2020 as a very similar sort of experience where we're getting these
Was that
games
broken
from.
though?
I don't think it
Because
was
this seems
broken.
broken. Yeah.
I don't think it was broken. I think it was more just the fact that it's like we've put 3 games from yesteryear on a ROM and given it to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
We expect you to pay full price for that, which is not great. I feel like it's a very similar sort of thing, trying to sort of port these older games into a new console and sort of try and get them to relive that nostalgia in a way that doesn't really work or feel particularly smooth. And it hasn't really worked. So I think it's been a weird week for fans of Metal Gear Solid. That's for sure.
Yeah. You really hope eventually it's like these are small studios that can't afford to do it right. Like you look at the Grand Theft Auto collection that came out really half baked, and compare that to say the Tony Hawk remake that was the same game effectively with a fresh coat of paint and some new songs and just a few extra gameplay twists that made it feel like, okay, this is like an all-time remake. You don't have to go full Resident Evil 2 on it, but you can at least try a little bit and not have it become a joke or just something that people will buy because they'll buy anything that's got that written on it, the name of the game written on it. Okay, Red Dead Redemption, sure, I'll buy that again. Or you can just put that little bit of extra polish on it, and just the difference it makes to the reputation of that publisher, I think, is significant. So it's disappointing that they have done it in this way where there is menus that are missing from certain ports, and there's like widescreen issues that for a game that wasn't designed in widescreen. Like they just haven't thought of those little things. And this isn't even the news item, so we were going on and on about it. But at least Snake Eater Delta is not the same way inclined. if this is the test bed for what they can do with that extra bit of effort, then I hope that it's applied to other games in the future. Moving on, hopefully this one's a bit of a quicker item because we've got a big bit of news coming out later. April 12th, 2024, the day the bombs drop. Of course, we're referencing Amazon Studios' Fallout TV series, which is premiering on April 12, 2024. The show's official account posted the date on social media this week, following a teaser that was shown behind closed doors at Gamescom a bit earlier this year. So what do we know so far about the Fallout series? It's taking place in Los Angeles. It's focusing on Vault 33, which we still don't really know much about, but I'm sure it won't be long before we get like an actual trailer. We do know that it features a very talented cast of actors who have a lot of experience on TV, including Walton Goggins, who people might know from The Shield, Justified, Sons of Anarchy, Kyle MacLachlan, who was Special Agent Dale Cooper on Twin Peaks, Ella Purnell, who recently has become known from Yellow Jackets, Michael Emerson, who played Benjamin Linus on Lost, and Zach Cherry, who plays Dylan on Severance. Toby, what's your excitement levels now that we have a bit more detail about Fallout TV series?
It's interesting because like Fallout was never really a game that I could sort of really get into. I'd played a little bit of 4 and a little bit of 76. Oof. And I think
3 or Vegas.
No 3 or Vegas. I probably should because I hear good things, but I think following the success of a lot of these game TV shows, especially The Last of Us and whatnot, it's definitely piqued my interest a little bit. And then obviously seeing that list of actors like Walton Goggins and Kyle MacLachlan, sign me up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like I think that sort of it needed that star power, if anything, to sort of get more casual, watchers or fans on the product. I know that there were going to be people who were just like, "Yep, it's Fallout, sign me up." The fact that it's in Los Angeles, apart from sort of like the East Coast, where most of obviously Vegas and whatnot, but I think like Fallout 4 was in Boston, I think. So having it much on the West Coast for this one could be cool. But yeah, like cautiously optimistic. I might give it a watch and see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned like the cast as a draw card because I feel like the names to me that on like a star power basis, they're not like, oh, it's Chris Pine and like it's Tobey Maguire. Like I'm definitely watching that. It's not that kind of thing. It's more these are really respected, often like character actors, or even like often background or side characters, or maybe they're like the second or third build in the cast, but they're all really, really talented and really good. So to see what they can come up with a series like Fallout, I'm guessing that there'll be like a younger, more kind of unknown protagonist that will be in the world that's kind of ruled by these more established people. And they'll kind of be the avatar for the player, which will probably make it feel a bit more like the games. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. And I've always had really, I wouldn't say high expectations, but I've always thought that a Fallout TV series could work really well if done properly, which I think I've probably talked on podcasts about in the past. But, starting off in the vault and then like kind of moving to the outside world and experiencing the different factions that are out there. Like it's almost taking like the best parts of The Walking Dead when it was in its heyday, meeting with a series that's been really well received this year called Silo on Apple TV, and like the mystery of like what's the vaults all about, what's Vault Tech up to, what happened when the bombs dropped. Throw in kind of a story like The Last of Us where maybe you do have to like transport someone somewhere, or there's a reason to go out into the wasteland. And I think like using The Last of Us as a template of, okay, here's a world that is ripe for TV and a universe that's ripe for different kinds of storytelling. The way that they told those stories, for example, about Bill and Frank in like that kind of separate episode to the rest of the story, I really hope that the people working on this series were inspired by the success of The Last of Us and have gone in a similar path. Not so much the Halo kind of Assassin's Creed, like the movies that take a good idea and don't quite pull it off. We've seen that many times before. So high hopes over here.
You don't really want to sort of stray too far from the path, but then you also want to keep it, somewhat original to get things going. And I think there's enough there in the Fallout sort of IP and franchise to sort of tell maybe a little bit of a different story there, which I think lends itself to, obviously in a new location with these obviously very talented actors. So I think there's some really good ground there for something slightly different to come out of it, but I feel like it's going to maintain that very familiar old timey like 1950 songs on the radio sort of thing that Fallout is so used to. So I think it's going to be fun to see someone walking around with a Pip-Boy on their wrist and collecting bottle caps and things like that. So I can't wait. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. It'll be definitely very fun. So I think I will probably check it out and see what it is, what it's like.
Yeah, and it's also not a world where it's contingent on like one key character, like a Master Chief or something where you need to nail like Nathan Drake and who's going to play them. No one really cares about that with Fallout because it's all about the world and the way that the tone of it is conveyed. And do they get the, like as you said, like do they get all those things right, like the music and the Nuka-Cola and these little things that make it feel like a Fallout world. Moving on, we've got some molecular division happening over at Sony with 15 to 20% of Media Molecule staff being laid off in a strategic change at PlayStation's UK studio responsible for games like Little Big Planet and Dreams. We've got the announcement after it was kind of put out there from some of the staff themselves who were laid off, but Media Molecule put out this statement saying, we've made significant strategic changes during the past year, including shifting our focus from Dreams to our new project. We have had to make the difficult decision to begin consultation process for team members within certain departments of the studio. This is a tough moment for the individuals impacted and studio overall. Yada, yada, yada. We will continue to support the Dreams community for the foreseeable future. Yada, yada, yada. Basically, they've laid off about 20 jobs is what it comes down to. There's some original reporting from GLHF stating that they were targeting a headcount of 115 employees. We know they previously had 135. So a bit of a reduction there at Media Molecule. And Tilby, it's got to be a bit of kind of dust settling on moving from Dreams, which is such a specific type of project. I'm not even going to call it a game, to maybe going back to what they're known for with the likes of, Tearaway, Little Big Planet. Do you think that we're going to see, they mentioned their new project. Do you think we're going to see something more similar to what they've done in the past? And we've lost a lot of those staff over the years as they've moved into the kind of Dreams type of ecosystem. What's your reaction to this kind of news?
I obviously very sad. Firstly, this is people losing their job, and that's never really fun. Having been there myself, I think it's a different kind of layoff. Obviously, as they've mentioned, that they're sort of moving from. I guess I don't want to say that Dreams has sort of its life cycle has ended, but it's definitely in its sort of like twilight phase where it's, the last sort of year or so of the project before it obviously, I don't want to say gets shut down, but they're sort of turning the lights off there and going on to something new, whether that is a new Tearaway or Little Big Planet, or it is something completely different. It doesn't really matter. They're obviously in that sort of transition phase to move into something else. So I can understand that they wanted to sort of move people on and sort of certain people currently in the Dreams project may not have fit for the new one, which obviously sucks. But look, it's always going to be tough. And I think, 20 jobs out of 135, with 15-20% of their current workforce, it's not a small number. It's not an insignificant amount. Like, it's obviously very tough, but I think whether or not this makes, and we've heard all these sort of excuses from a whole bunch of other studios in the past. This makes them more aerodynamic and
There's
like,
so
what?
much crap that gets spouted whenever there's these layoffs. Like the rhetoric that they pump out
Yeah.
is almost comical, like the way that they try and phrase it. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's as I said it earlier at the start of the show, like this is obviously the, I guess, the
countless.
direct
It's happened countless times this year.
countless times, and it's the direct sort of like opposite to all of the good stuff that's been happening in the gaming world this year with the release of all of these great games and
Mm.
advancements in new tech and everything. It's just like the reverse of that is people are losing their jobs, their livelihoods, and it's not just a contained thing. This is happening for a whole bunch of studios, big and small. So
Hmm.
obviously very tough,
Yeah,
very distressing, but at least Media Molecule haven't completely just faffed some like PR bullshit
yeah,
to the nth degree that the other studio did the other week, which was
yeah.
terrible.
And at least they haven't been shut down, which
Yes.
honestly, it wouldn't have been shocking if that happened because going from like, okay, let's pull this back a little bit. Media Molecule, it's quite sad what's happened to them in some ways because they were one of the most important studios at Sony at a certain point. Like Little Big Planet and Little Big Planet 2 were, I would almost say, like system sellers for the PlayStation 3. For a certain demographic, like they were really big games. It was a very innovative approach to gaming for the and very of that time as well, as far as like level building. And you've got this mascot character in Sackboy who was like almost like an unofficial mascot for PlayStation during that era. And then Tearaway was probably not having the same impact as Little Big Planet, but it was also a fun game. It was very creative again. It was probably very important to the PlayStation Vita. And then Dreams happens, and they've been working on that for so long. They've lost a lot of staff that had been there for a long time, going back to those Little Big Planet days. I feel like now they're at this point now where Dreams is effectively done, and they're moving on to, as they say, the next project. And they look around and go, we don't have the staff that we had when we were working on Little Big Planet and Tearaway. We've got all these extra people who were brought in to do these extra jobs that aren't necessary under any game that's not Dreams, because it's a completely different kettle of fish, something like that. It's a game making engine effectively, and now that that's in the past, they kind of don't have their identity in a lot of ways. They certainly don't have the probably the independence that they had. They don't have the rope to go out and be super creative and innovative like they've had up until this point, because Dreams just wasn't a big success, and it was such a lengthy project that it's certainly cost. I would have to say it cost more money than it made, and I don't think it ended up being what Sony had planned for it as this kind of I mean, they wanted it to be something that it never became, I think. So it's a bit sad to see what it's become there, and I really hope whatever this next project that they're working on, I just want it to be something really cool, really fun, and something that sells really well to put some extra oomph back into that studio and give them some more long-term viability, because there's been times where it's felt like what's going to happen there. Are they going to get shut down? Because we know that Sony's not afraid of closing down studios. Speaking of PlayStation, the next and main headline for this week is what in Crash Bandicoot's name is going on at PlayStation. The following news was not widely reported in mainstream games media, which left it to GameDeveloper.com, as well as a few other sites, to compile this report as follows. After 34 years with Sony, Connie Booth, the vice president of PlayStation's internal production team, is no longer working at Sony Interactive Entertainment. News of her departure was revealed by God of War and Twisted Metal original game director David Jaffe, who claimed Booth's 27-year tenure at PlayStation is over. So why does this matter? Is she just some suit working at PlayStation? Connie Booth actually rose up through the ranks at PlayStation over many years and was involved in production on more than 100 games and nearly all of PlayStation's major franchises. Effectively, anything that was produced in the US. So we're talking Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man, The Last of Us, Uncharted, Ghost of Tsushima. This also marks the third high-profile exit from PlayStation in recent months, including then SEI head Jim Ryan, who announced his retirement in late September, and Naughty Dog co-president Evan Wells, who left in mid-July. This is kind of where the rumors and speculation begin. So while David Jaffe hasn't held a role in the PlayStation family for many years, his YouTube video on this topic stated 2 sources inside the company and 2 outside had validated the news, and a more recent update now has confirmation from PlayStation PR themselves. In a statement to news website Axios, a PlayStation rep said, "We're thankful for Connie's numerous contributions to the company and wish her the best in future endeavors." Connie Booth helped drive the success of the PlayStation Studios is experiencing today, and her passion in fostering an environment where a team's creative vision could fully flourish has left a positive impact on many game developers. End quote. So you'll notice her reason for leaving and a lot of the details mentioned by Jaffe were not addressed in PlayStation's statement, including his comments that she and her team were walked out of the building, the same way that the former SEI chief exec Sean Layden was allegedly forced out of the company in 2019. Since this rumor mill started churning, Jaffe has made comments about Sony devs being unhappy with the move into games as a service, which he said was brought upon by former CEO, or I guess he's retiring CEO, Jim Ryan, as well as frustration over the stalled development or unconfirmed cancellation of The Last of Us multiplayer factions. Commenting on Booth's departure, Jaffe also said, "The Sony we all came up with is mostly dead." Keep in mind that while Jaffe is obviously knowledgeable, well-informed, and well-connected at PlayStation, he's also notorious for his hot takes and shooting from the hip. Matt Tilby, what's going on at PlayStation?
Your guess is as good as mine, John O'Peck. I think, obviously, a whole bunch of this is speculation and hearsay, so we can't really, we don't want to be jumping into any sort of, statements or claims that may get us in hot water, reporting on it. But it just sounds so bizarre. I think, to have someone like Connie Booth, like who you said has worked on pretty much every PlayStation studio title under the sun and has been working their way up the the PlayStation ladder for many years. It's just such a weird way to sort of depart the company and sort of having them say one thing and then obviously being told another, whether or not that thing from Mr. Jaffe is true or not, given his sort of like weird way of working things is an entirely different kettle of fish. But it's interesting because we can all see that like the games as a service thing is definitely becoming a bit more prevalent, and whether or not Jim Ryan really tried to sort of force it down all of the throats of the PlayStation studios. We'd heard a lot of sort of backlash from the PlayStation studios, about that sort of thing. But yeah, it's also very muddy. I'm sure a lot of this will develop in the coming months. We'll probably hear more about it before the end of the year anyway. But it doesn't sound pretty, and I think there will probably end up being a lot more he said, she said. I would not be surprised if there was some sort of lawsuit coming, and whether or not David Jaffe has to sort of state his claims or sort of state the validity of his claims. And he said, "Oh, there's 2 sources inside the company and 2 outside." Are those two sources inside the company going to be, ratted out? Are they going to have to try and confirm their identity? Like, it does not paint a very good picture for PlayStation as a whole.
It doesn't paint a picture of stability and happiness to me.
No.
It's a time where on paper everyone should be happy. PlayStation 5 is selling like crazy. It's blasting away, Xbox as far as their main competitor, selling really well. They've had games that have sold really well this year. Spider-Man's high selling American release, blah 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 blah. She's very much tied into that American side of PlayStation. There's these two sides with Japan and America, and I know that there's been kind of conflict between those two sides and their different ways of doing things, probably very similar to Nintendo over the years. But she's no doubt, Connie Booth, been a huge part. She was there before PlayStation existed. So as a business person, she was pulled in to help it grow, and she saw it become what it is today. So I understand Jaffe's kind of comment that, the PlayStation we know is dead, because you look at a company or you look at a sports franchise, and over a long period of time, if no one is there from when you were a kid, different owner, different GM, different players, different coach, what's the consistency apart from the uniform? Apart from the PS logo, what's the PlayStation that we fell in love with when we were kids? So it is a different company in a lot of ways. They're still making great games, but I can see this conflict within that studio existing, where we made our bread and butter on Uncharted, God of War, on The Last of Us. These games, these single player narrative experiences. Now Jim Ryan's coming along telling us we have to force everything into that game as a service box, and then putting the kibosh on factions. Whatever the heck is happening with factions, whether it's cancelled or it's indefinitely delayed, it's hard to believe that the game is so bad that it can't see the light of day. And for people who've worked on that, or people who are in other studios seeing that happen and wondering, say you work at Santa Monica, are they going to make our next game be game as a service because it didn't work out so well for Naughty Dog and they're the teacher's pet? I can just see there being a lot of tension there and a lot of unhappy developers as we know, being pushed into this direction that now we're seeing the fallout. Like, did the Naughty Dog, what was his name? I just mentioned
Evan
it before.
Wells.
Evan Wells. Did the co-president leave over some tension over factions? Did Jim Ryan leave because people weren't happy with the direction he'd been pushing, and was it kind of a backlash to that, despite the happy press release that gets put out saying that he's going to spend more time with his kids or whatever it is? Connie Booth, we know they've confirmed she's left, and we have reason to believe, when PlayStation doesn't correct the rumors, when they don't correct what's being said about factions, and they let us simmer on it and they let us speculate, we have no reason to think that there's any distortion to what's being said. So I believe she was fired for whatever reason. We don't know. Is she a scapegoat for the games as a service stuff, or was she like resistant to the games as a service stuff? And something that hasn't been confirmed is that Jaffe said her team underneath her was also part of the group that walked out the building that day. So whichever way you put it, whether you believe half of what we read out before or all of it, it's not a picture of peace and functionality and efficiency that we would think PlayStation should be, based on how great they are seeming to operate as far as the games they put out, as far as how well PlayStation 5s are selling, and I guess the past 5 years or so. So I think it's very much a stay tuned and see what comes out. Like you said, there's going to be more coming out in the future. I find it strange that media isn't really reporting on this, but I guess there could be many reasons for that, whether it's the difficult to validate nature of such a thing, or uh, the you know the risk of pissing off PlayStation. And I think that's where a journalist's job is, to actually ask these questions and get to the bottom of it and then report on it.
Yes.
So hopefully, we don't see a ton of that in the games industry, but I'm hoping that someone will be able to come up with something for us to talk about in weeks to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, the fact that no one had really said anything about it is concerning. I think people are sort of waiting for valid opinions and well, not really opinions, valid facts on the matter before they
Yep.
sort of start, broadcasting stuff as potential rumors and sort of really getting the rumor mill going. I will say that if it is a fact that Connie Booth was fired and the team was fired, like, I would not be surprised if Microsoft or Nintendo are smelling blood in the water and
Ooh.
they want to go, hey, we want to really do some good stuff for our our single player games. We really want to sort of boost that up and sort of keep that sort of thing, that sort of strong side of our business going, and sort of really look to bring them on as part of the team and where they sort of sit with that sort of idea. So I think, PlayStation's loss is going to be whoever picks them up's gain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that she's obviously got that experience, and the team obviously have that experience. However many people of them are in that team, but like, it's a huge loss, I think, for PlayStation as a whole, regardless of however she was forced out the door. Like, it does sound like she's probably been more resistant to the games as a service thing rather than being a scapegoat for it. I think the games as a service sort of idea hasn't really reached its full potential with PlayStation yet. I'd say there's a couple sort of titles or franchises that are sort of putting a toe in the water for games as a service. But yeah, I still think there's a long way to go for that. And I think that delay in doing that is probably down to people like Connie Booth and her team sort of standing up for the sort of, as you said, authentic single player, story driven experience.
Yeah, no, well said. And I feel like PlayStation would have to have some kind of like non-compete, NDA, all those things times a million with someone like her getting let go. Big kind of payout, like, we'll give you all this money to leave, but you're not allowed to say a single thing, and you're not allowed to go work for Xbox. So
Yeah, it would be smart to do that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Miss Allie Hart's Carousel of Chaos.
Anarchy! I don't even know what that means, but I love it!
So the Carousel of Chaos this week, no games, no 20 questions. We'll give you a rest. We'll give you a week off from that, Tilby. We are going to talk our favorite spooky movies and games. Maybe quicker than we would have planned to earlier, just because we've run a bit long due to our robust conversation about Spider-Man 2 and PlayStation and Mario. But in the spirit of all things freaky, Tilby, I might go first. So I've been a bit of a scaredy cat for the majority of my adult life.
I'm the same. I agree.
Yeah, and it's only really the last few years that I've kind of delved into this this side of narrative and embracing all things scary. And I think Brendan and maybe even this podcast has played a bit of a role in that, because Brendan and Ali especially are very much all about the spooky movies and not so much games for Ali. I think that the games took things a little bit too far as the scares go. But Brendan loves a good bit of horror, as obviously with Resident Evil and Dino Crisis just being a couple of those. But for me, in the last kind of 12 months or so, it's been a bit of an education on horror, and some of the movies I've enjoyed. Alien was a big one. The Thing, these very influential films from kind of the 80s, 70s, 80s that are still really watchable today. I checked out Stephen King's It remake, would you call it? I guess it's the movie version instead of the mini series. And been going on a bit of a Stephen King binge lately with some suggestions from Brendan. But I wanted to end my movie list with Shaun of the Dead, which is a perfect blend of horror and comedy. Anything you wanted to shout out this spooky season?
I think on the movie side of things, Shaun of the Dead is a perfect sort of encapsulation of, you know, a perfect blend of comedy and horror for people like myself who are a bit of a sissy, who don't really like going full bore into those sorts of things. Obviously, you've got like the Scary Movie series, and that just sort of like riffs on those sorts of horror movie tropes and whatnot. But I am definitely more in the camp of like I'm very much the same in terms of like within the last maybe year or so. I've definitely been probably more games, like horror games rather than horror movies. I think because there's obviously a lot of different types of horror, and I think for me it's more about sort of that, I don't want to say existential horror, but I think sort of looking at like the paranormal and sort of going to the other side. And I was really excited for when the Medium came out. You know, it would have been a year or two ago. Obviously, turned out to be an absolute trash heap of a game, but the idea was really compelling. Being able to sort of, you know, flip to the other side and sort of have that sort of alter ego, or that sort of like opposite personality for yourself to sort of see things. And I think that was really cool. Obviously, you know, the last couple of Resident Evil games, 7 and 8, where you're going more first person and sort of dealing with a little bit more action, but obviously that sort of really dark, unnerving sort of horror. No spoilers for 8, but when you do find the baby, uh, possibly one of the best horror moments in the last maybe 5 or so years. Absolutely perfect. It's just like that feeling of dread that comes over you. Like,
Sure, yeah.
you know something's going to happen, but you don't know what it is. And when it does happen, it's messed up. So I think that sort of horror for me is a lot more compelling rather than just like your simple jump scare, like a Five Nights at Freddy's or something, where it's like
Yes.
jump scares for the sake of it. But having those sorts of horror is something I really enjoy. And I think I will end by sort of shouting out a lady I did a podcast with by the name of Ash Millman, who works over at PlayStation Access in the UK. She loves her horror, and she recommended Soma, the indie game, I think on the PS4 and PS5. But
First
it,
person, yeah.
yes, first person, deals with that sort of like it's all under, or it's in under the sea, I think, in a sort of a station there. But it deals with the sort of those existential crises of like becoming a robot, like robots and humans becoming robots, and sort of losing your humanity, having those sorts of human parts of you replaced. And that sort of type of horror is such a weird and wonderful way of doing it. I feel like I'm rambling on for so long because there's so many things I could say about it, but there's so many different types of horror games I've really enjoyed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, there's definitely, so if I can talk about my experience with horror games, which probably is what got me into, like, opened me up to watching horror movies in the last couple of years, because I started to get into horror games when Until Dawn came out, and it wasn't even straight away.
Yes.
It was like a year or two later when I saw it on sale, because I'm such a big fan of the, for lack of a better term, the Telltale style kind of choose your own adventure video game, where Heavy Rain, the Quantic Dream kind of stuff, and Super Massive is one of the best at that. Until Dawn had amazing reviews. I loved the look of it and the gameplay of it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. Hopefully it's not too scary. And I played it and I loved it, and I platinumed it, and I'm now a big fan of everything they do, except I have stayed away from kind of the ones that haven't been received quite so well. And I wish they would go back into more of the Quarry and Until Dawn stuff instead of the what's the name of the
Dark Pictures anthology.
the dark, yeah. Instead, I'm still enjoying those and still play them, but I just, yeah, much prefer the Quarry and Until Dawn over those. But yeah, that kind of woke something in me. Alien Isolation, I mentioned before how
Oh
much
yeah.
I love Alien, but Alien Isolation totally nails that dread that you mentioned, and being on that ship. It's basically like playing out the movie in a lot of ways, and to do that when that game came out, with the level of AI and the intelligence of that AI that they were able to get, back then, it really would make me excited, like super hyped if they were to, you know, Creative Assembly, that their bread and butter is the Total War series, but if they were to stray away from that again to make like an Alien Isolation sequel or spiritual successor, that would be a dream come true. Or if some other studio was to be given the reins with that kind of thing, because there's a lot of Alien games out there, as Brendan has noted and talked about before. Most of them are pretty terrible, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that game really nailed it. And then this year alone, Dead Space, RE4, horror has been some of the best experiences I've had playing games this year. RE2 for me was my first, like the remake was my first toe dip into the Resident Evil series. And even then, it was still like I remember having conversations, I think, with Brendan, like, how scary is it? Like, am I going to be? I love that game. Like, I think that there's so many, and I don't know exactly what is left over from the original and what was a brand new innovation because I didn't play the PlayStation 1 version. But there's so many cool things in there and approaches to the game design and approaches to the horror of, you know, fleeing from Mr. X and the way that that particular character is serving the horror of the game as an enemy that you can't defeat. He's just always kind of there, like anxiety. Like he almost like represents that dread and stress because he's
Yeah.
always there and you can't get rid of him. And you can run away easily enough, but he's always going to come back and he just keeps popping up. Like I kind of love, I don't know if it's meant to represent that, but I kind of love that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. He's like a bad smell. You can't get rid of him. Honestly, like
Totally.
he's so annoying in that aspect, and I can understand people probably getting a little bit frustrated. It's like, why won't he die? And then it's just like, just go away. I'm trying to do things, but like,
Yeah, I'm trying to solve the puzzle.
Yeah, like just I'm busy, man. Can't you see I'm a little occupied at this point? But I think that's that sort of thing is what made that game so great and so memorable. Is like,
yeah,
you've got to keep yourself on your toes. You know that he might be just like right around the corner, ready to sock you in the face if you get too close. But like, I think most of those sort of Resident Evil remakes have been really well received. Obviously, three was okay. Like it had its moments.
I liked it,
but
yeah.
But then 4 like really sort of stepped it up again. Once again, another, you know, game of the year contender. But I think what it did for just the quality of the game and sort of how it utilized the horror and sort of scare aspects was perfect. And I think the Resident Evil games will always be remembered as like horror, that perfect mix of horror and action. And obviously maybe like when you get to like 5 and 6, when it's like punching boulders and things like that, that's when it gets a little bit over the top and probably past its welcome. But you know, the first couple are to me that perfect combination.
Cool, yeah. And the last thing I'll throw out there as a game is Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. That was very much from a time that I wasn't into any level of horror, and it's not like it's a terrifying game or something, but it does represent the fun that you can have with horror tropes and it's almost like the Treehouse of Horrors Simpsons kind of approach to Halloween and horror that Rockstar threw onto a game and a world that I already loved. So shout out to Undead Nightmare, one of the great DLCs or expansion packs.
I think the other, like the last one I could probably remember is like the Dead Rising series, just being trapped in a mall, like, and spending however many hours it is just like running around firing Mega Man bullets at people and slicing zombies up with a katana and a lawnmower and things like that. Like, just that sort of weird and wacky side of it always as well is a lot of fun too.
The week that's yet to come, presented by Dash Water.
Coming up this week, again, I don't know if there's a new More Than Hentai, but check it out anyway, because Brendan's always bringing the goods with that podcast. Over in the film space, I have to do a correction, or I guess a follow-up from last week when I predicted that Five Nights at Freddy's could be one of the highest grossing video game adaptations of all time. It's currently sitting at 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I don't know what the box office translation is, but it's not looking good. So I will walk that back
Swing and a miss
a little bit. If they had nailed it, I'm sure then we might not need to talk about that at all, but there it is. We've also got There's Something in the Barn coming out, which looks like a Christmas-themed horror comedy. Bring Him to Me is coming out. Then on TV, somehow none of this stuff came up when I did this search last week, but I will say we missed that there's new episodes of Rick and Morty. There's new episodes of Upload, new episodes of Big Mouth, all happening in the past week, and we missed it completely.
We're also getting season 2 of Invincible this week, so
Ooh,
that is definitely one I am excited for.
Sick. I've been looking forward to that. I'm really excited. And are we hosting this podcast next week, or is Brendan back? I can't remember.
We'll have a hostile takeover if we aren't, but
so we can talk about Invincible,
just so we can talk about Invincible and Omni-Man popping up in Mortal Kombat 1 and all of that sort of goodness. But yeah, very excited.
Yeah, we've also got WWE Crown Jewel for the wrestling fans out there. Over in the game space, we've got Star Ocean, The Second Story R, My Time at Sandrock, The Talos Principle 2, Thirsty Suitors, RoboCop Rogue City, Fashion Dreamer, and WarioWare Move It, all coming out between now and the next 7 days. Anything I've mentioned here strike your fancy as something people should check out?
I do love a good WarioWare game. I hear that it's probably geared more towards sort of like the fitness side of things, but any sort of opportunity for weird and wacky mini games is always appreciated. I did see a bunch of people playing the RoboCop game, I think as like an early access or like a beta, a bunch of streamers, and it looks as like messed up and gory and unnecessarily violent as the original movies, which is a lot of fun. So I'm excited to see how that one plays out. I've heard okay things, but yeah,
we'll see. Is it a first-person shooter?
Yes, it is.
I remember the trailer for this now, and yeah, hopefully it's well received, because that could be a lot of fun and a nice surprise this year that we weren't expecting. Very good. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Invincibles. If that's coming out, then definitely going to be checking that one out. But for now, thanks as always to our lovely, lovely, lovely friends over at Audio Technica. Check them out for the very best in audio gear. Brendan is still in Europe, which we probably should have mentioned up the top. But, if you've been paying attention, you know the deal. You're stuck with me until we for now. But will we be back next week? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. You'll have to tune in just to find out whether Brendan got held up at customs, or whether he decided to extend his trip, or whether we just are disorganized and don't know when he's coming back. But you can catch myself at Johnny himself. You can find Matt at It's Tilby. And as always, dear listeners, much love.
And stay hungry.
Stay spooky.
We'll see you around.